What's the best Bible translation out there? Hi, my name's Pastor Wes Ellis. I'm pastor at First Congregational Church in Ramona, and this is a question I get all the time. What Bible translation should I read? Which one should I trust? What's the best one? And something I say a lot, sort of in jest, but I kind of mean it, is that my only strong opinion about Bible translations is that you shouldn't have a strong opinion about Bible translations. Now, that's generally true. I think that unless you are a biblical Hebrew or Greek scholar, at least adept at translating those original languages, you probably don't really need to worry too much about which translation is the best. There are, of course, better translations than others, but anytime someone is translating an ancient text, they have to make difficult decisions, and there's usually good reasons for those decisions. And so I think it's best to read multiple translations if you're really hung up on a specific meaning of a specific passage. But know always that if you are reading the Bible in English, you are not reading original text. You are reading someone's translation, someone's best attempt of distilling the original meaning and original language into modern English language. So it's always going to be a disconnect, and you just have to know that going into it. So it's always going to be kind of an imperfect science in understanding the text from a layman's perspective. Now, I will say, now that I've said that you shouldn't have a strong opinion and you should read multiple translations, I will say there's a few really ones that I prefer. I think the gold standard is still the New Revised Standard version of the Bible. And if you're really into studying and wanting to get the best scholarship on it, I'd recommend the New Oxford Annotated Bible. Still, it's kind of getting older now, but this is still kind of a gold standard for academic institutions for studying the Bible. This is a study Bible, but maybe more academic than most people are looking for. So, any other study Bible would be good but that's another one where I'd be careful which translation you're using if you're reading a study Bible, because often the study notes are going to be from the perspective of people's translations, and therefore study notes will kind of lean more conservative or more progressive depending on the context and stuff. So if you can find a study Bible in the Common English version, I would recommend that. The Common English Bible is a really easy to read translation, but also pretty darn accurate, pretty darn close to the original meaning. So I'd recommend that for readability. And of course, in my church, I should mention that in our pews, we use the New International Version. It does come with a lot of problems, and it is a translation that has a little more conservative bias when it makes decisions about translation. But overall, it's pretty readable and pretty faithful to the original text, if I can say so. Couple translations I would say to steer clear of is first of all, the King James Version of the Bible is, of course, the most popular. It's easy to find because it's so old that it's not copywritten or anything like that. So the King James Version of the Bible is not only really difficult to read for most modern readers, but it's also wildly inaccurate. And that's not because they were necessarily trying to be inaccurate, although you could loft a lot of criticisms about the process that, in the 17th century when they were translating that thing. But most importantly, they just didn't have the archaeological resources that we have now. They didn't have as ancient of manuscripts as we have at our disposal now. So more modern translations are going to have more reliable, more ancient copies of those texts. Something some people don't really realize. We don't actually have any of the original manuscripts from handwritten from Paul himself or anything like that from the Bible. Everything we have is ancient copy text. Now, of course, we have so many of them that we can cross-reference and know which ones are the older ones and which ones are more reliable. And that's exactly the kind of information that the King James version of the Bible just didn't have. They were using much more recent manuscripts to do their translation. So that, as well as some other biases that are just unhelpful. So I'd steer clear of the King James version of the Bible or the New King James version of the Bible. But again, it could be a helpful resource. I do love to read the Psalms, especially in the King James. They do sound beautiful in that. So it's not going to hurt you to read that, but I wouldn't study out of it. And same goes for another one, the English Standard Version, the ESV. That's probably the worst translation there is. They not only do kind of a literalist interpretation of a lot of the texts, but they have a very specifically conservative bias. They are doing a lot of extra work to preserve translations that don't actually make a lot of sense to the original Greek and Hebrew, but do preserve some doctrinal biases and dogmatic positions that they have. So I would also steer clear of the English Standard Version. So those are my recommendations, is ultimately read lots and compare different translations, but find a home in a translation that you think is readable and helpful to you. I think the New Revised Standard Version is still the best translation overall. The Common English Bible, the CEB, is another more readable but also quite reliable translation. And of course, the New International Version isn't going to kill you, even though if you ask a scholar, there's real problems with it too. So there you have it. I think that sums it up. If you really want to get specific and you really want to read original manuscripts, you're going to have to learn ancient Greek and Hebrew and a little bit of Aramaic. You're going to have to do that. But as long as you are reading in English, you're going to have to trust somebody else's expertise. And I actually think even if you knew some Greek and Hebrew, I know just enough to know that I'm going to trust somebody else because I don't know enough to rely on my own expertise. So it's always good to rely on someone else, but find the right version that you trust. And that's why I think multiple translations is the best way to go.